And I'd like to introduce Lacey Lofton. She's the National Account Manager for the United States Census Bureau. In the 18 years she's been with the agency, she has served as an analyst for the economic census, worked as a survey supervisor for current surveys, acted as a congressional liaison during the 2010 census, and supported the launch of the Statistics in Schools program. Lacey now leads the Census Bureau's national webinar series and is focused on outreach to organizations and governments throughout Texas. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. And Lacey, you have the floor.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited about this presentation and everything we're going to cover today. So I see we've got about 26 people here, which is a great number. So we're going to walk through a whole lot of things, but one of the things we always struggle with is before a presentation, knowing exactly what people are going to want or need from this specific presentation. So I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable asking questions as we go through this. Please interrupt me. This is for you. I talk about this stuff all the time. I want to make sure that we're actually addressing the things that this group specifically needs. So just to give you a quick outline, we're going to walk through, and I'm actually going to focus on things that are available on our website. So you can always go back and reference those. And Katie, thank you so much. I know you're going to be dropping these links into the chat as we go. So we're going to walk through some basics, and we're going to walk through the decennial, our two main programs, which are the decennial census and then the American Community Survey. We're going to talk about the differences between those. And we're going to talk a little bit about census geography because it can be unique. It's probably the best way to say it. A lot of times the things that we think of as normal humans as geography, so zip codes, counties and places, aren't necessarily the best way to use census data. So we'll talk about the decennial, the American Community Survey, census geography, and then we're going to go into our three most popular and most useful tools. So we're going to talk about data.census.gov. For those of you who have used census data in the past, you probably used American Factfinder. You may have used data.census.gov. It is our new main platform. So it's where almost all of our data releases go. We'll walk through that one. That's our biggest and most commonly used database. Then we'll walk through some of the more fancy, what I think are kind of the more fun ways to look at a lot of our data. So we'll walk through Census Business Builder. That is a tool that was originally started for people that were creating or looking to expand a business, but it actually has some really cool it makes really cool reports. It has some really nice built-in mapping features that are free. So all this is free and online. So it does a lot of work for you that we used to have to kind of start with our data and then build all these products. So we'll walk through that one. And then if we have time, we're going to look at a tool we call LEHD because we just love to make our acronyms as dorky as possible. So that one is shows not only where people live, but where they work. So if you are looking to understand where people are spending the day. Most of our surveys talk about where people sleep, not where they're spending the day. So that one will give you a little bit more context there. Before we get started, I'm going to pull up the chat because I actually just realized I'm not looking at it. Here we go. Okay, I want to make sure this is up. So the very first thing I want to talk about, and I'll do this briefly, and a lot of this will make more sense when we're going through the tools. So the decennial census, I think most of you have probably heard of the decennial census. This was one of our more unique decennial censuses with the pandemic. I know it's been unique for everyone, but the decennial census, of course, it was in 2020. We do it every year that ends in 10 or 0. So we have some unique challenges. We are still in the process of releasing that 2020 census data. We normally be a little further along in that process, but we're working through it. So the decennial census is an awesome census because it does find every single place that people either live or could live. And then we ask just really 5 data questions of each of those, of each person in each household. So again, we'll walk through this when we're actually in the tool, but the decennial census only has 5 data points. We really only asked 5 questions, and it was, what is your age? What is your race? What is your ethnicity? What is your sex? And do you rent or own your home? So a couple quick notes on that, and I'm glad this is being recorded. You can always come back and reference this at any point. But it really is just those 5 data points. It's mostly used for redistricting, but you can tell to a really low level where people physically are located. A couple notes on those. Because we get these questions a lot. We only have 2 options for sex, so male or female are the only 2 options there. And for tenure, what we mean by tenure is, do you rent or own your home? That's just basic information, but it's a unique term. Another question along those lines that we get a lot are, what is the difference between race as defined by the federal government and ethnicity? And again, we're going to look at this in just a second, but for us, race, you can be one of 4 categories or as many of these as apply to you. So white, Black, Asian, or Native American Pacific Islander. So those are your 4 options. The data can be a little confusing when you're looking at it because we want people to identify every single category that they feel applies to them. So when you're looking at our race categories, basically in any publication we have, they will not add up to 100. That can be incredibly confusing. So that's just something to remember. They won't add up to 100. They're not supposed to. People choose as many categories as they feel apply to them. Everyone is required to choose one. So you'll see at least one option there, but you can choose as many as you feel are appropriate. And then second, we have ethnicity. For statistical purposes, ethnicity comes down to, are you of Hispanic or Latino heritage or are you not? We get a lot of questions on why race and ethnicity are different within our surveys. It gets really complex. People have a lot of strong feelings on it. What I will say is since we split those questions out, we've been getting a lot more rich and more informative data. So this might shock you, but when you get a form at your household and you're filling it out, if it's from the government, you might just kind of rush through and check the first thing that applies to you. So because we're asking in 2 separate questions, we get a lot more very rich data. So that's the decennial census. You guys can unmute, ask any questions. Any questions, just overview about the decennial. I'll touch on ACS, and then we'll go in and start looking at that, at all this data, and it'll really start coming together. Questions? I'm looking at the chat. Katie, do you see anything?
I don't see anything coming through yet, but like I said, if anyone has any questions as we go along, I'll be monitoring that, and I can pop into Lacey and let her know. So feel free to drop that in the chat at any time.
Okay, perfect. So just a quick touch on ACS. The 2 main ones we're going to discuss today are decennial and the American Community Survey. Quick background on the American Community Survey. It used to be part of, and actually still is, part of our decennial census program. So back in 2000, if you were, in the country, or you might remember, 1 in 6 households got a really long questionnaire, and it your neighbors might not have, and it was really long, and it asked all sorts of questions like, how many toilets do you have? And when do you leave for work? And where do you go when you leave for work? And when do you come back? And some of the questions can seem a little strange and make people a little uncomfortable, but every question we asked was specifically tied to some government program. So we needed to understand about transportation or about sewage or about infrastructure in an area. We were only doing that for 1 in 6 households every decennial. So 2000 was the last time we did that. And then we got these really cool things called computers, and we were able to tabulate data a lot more quickly. So now we have the decennial census, which is only short form. So we're only asking those 5 questions of each person in a household. And then the American Community Survey is now a completely standalone operation that is going on every single month in every single county or county equivalent across the country. And what's really cool about that is, America changes so quickly, especially just depending on where you live in the United States. Decennial census is excellent, but it can get old really quickly. The American Community Survey, because we're running it separately, has a lot. We're able to publish every year, and it has a lot more rich data about not just where people are living, but how they're living. So when we go through data.census.gov, I'm going to walk you through the different data that is produced by these different, the census of the American Community Survey. We'll walk through them in detail, so it'll make a little more sense when we have a little more context. But basically, the decennial census is once every decade, just mostly tells you where people live and some very basic information. And then the American Community Survey is released every year, and there's a couple different data sets we'll go into as well. And that information is available every year, all the way down to the census tract, and it tells you a lot about how people live. So education, where they work, how many people are enrolled in school at the time, educational attainment, information about their jobs. There's a whole lot more information we have about living conditions, households, and families. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to start with data.census.gov. In the chat, will you guys let me know or raise your hand if you've ever used data.census.gov? I want to know how much from the beginning to start. Okay, we have a couple. All right, so depending on your, hopefully you can see my screen now. Depending on your personal experience and your interaction with these websites, some people love them, some people hate them. It is what replaced American Factfinder, which was our main data platform up until about 2 years ago. But this is the main platform for data from everywhere from the decennial census, the American Community Survey. This is where you can come. This is where we store the data for all the different geographies we publish for and all of those different surveys and censuses. So this is really a one-stop shop. It does have some limitations. This doesn't produce anything super fancy. It doesn't, yes.
I just want to say we can't see your screen. You should be a host, so you should be able to share. So
it says that I'm sharing. Oh, I didn't click share. Now you should be able to see it.
Okay, now we can see it. Awesome, thank you.
Okay, good deal. Sorry, guys. I could have talked for hours about something you couldn't have seen, so thank you, Katie. So this is our main platform. If you used American Factfinder, you either loved it and now hate that this has changed probably, or you hated it and might like this one a little better. Just to touch on why we updated our platform. The American Community Survey, not the American Community Survey, American Factfinder, our previous platform, was really static. So it was, we produced tables, we put them in there, and you could think of it as like a filing cabinet. So you could go pull a table that already was in existence from American Factfinder. Data.census.gov, while we built it to have kind of the same feel and the same purposes, is pulling directly from our API. What's really nice about that is it gives us a lot more mobility. So we can, and we're working on different capabilities to do that. So these tables are being built as we're pulling them. So that's something to remember too. If you have to pause for a second, don't give up on it. The system's just taking a minute. And it's gonna give us a lot more opportunities to do custom tabulations and produce some other products. So if you are just looking for a very basic number, which I don't think this group is like a very basic number type of group. Let me pull the chat back up just so I can see it. There we go. Sure I'm not missing anything. Here we go. If you're just looking for a very basic number, the search bar here will find you, say, the number of people in Texas. So this is getting a lot better. If you haven't used this in a while, it was learning as it went, so it's a lot better now. But so let's say people in Texas. And what this will do is it will pull up the most often chosen results for someone who searched something similar. So sometimes this works well, sometimes it doesn't. You can see here that there's, just different, Texas City always comes up, but if you just want the number of people in Texas, this is a pretty quick and easy way to find it. So you'll click on this, it'll take you to a basic overview. You can do this for counties, you can do this for zip codes. If it's a very straightforward search, this is a quick and easy way to do it. I think for most of you, you're gonna be doing more comparisons, you're gonna be doing more analysis for geographies near each other. So the search bar is really only for things very, very simple. And what we're going to focus on today mostly is the advanced search. So this is literally data.census.gov. It's more visually appealing. It is a little bit. Right here under advanced search, this is when it'll take you to where there's all these filters. So what we're going to do is we're going to filter and look at different data sources, different way to access data, and it'll produce charts for us. It does have some basic mapping capabilities. They are constantly updating that. I feel like every time I give a presentation, they've updated it and I haven't realized it. So we'll see what the capabilities are here. But we're just going to walk through different ways to access data through data.census.gov. I always start with geography. And the reason I always start with geography, and this is where we're also going to have a conversation about census geographies, is for everything we publish, we will either publish it or not publish it at a certain level. So here are our top choices. So nation, I think everyone understands that one. State is great. We have a lot of really rich information at the state, but for most of you, I would assume that's kind of a too high of a level. You want to look at a more sub-state level. We have county or county equivalent. That can be another one too. For places, these are cities, mostly cities, villages, towns, depending on where you live. We will always have the most updated boundaries. We are the official data steward for geographies as well for the country. So we can tell you how many people live in Chicago based on their current boundaries. We can tell you how many people live in Los Angeles based on their current boundaries. The one caveat and the one thing I'll give you caution here is, depending on where you're looking or where you live, sometimes boundaries change a lot and sometimes they don't change very often. So just keep that in mind when you're looking. So if you're, say, comparing the city you live in to 5 years ago. If those boundaries change dramatically, that might be a reason for the data to change dramatically. So this is one we change it every year depending on the legal boundaries of that legal entity. So that's place. Here we have zip code tabulation area. One of the geographies that most drives statisticians crazy are zip codes because they can change constantly. They're also really popular. Everybody knows what zip code they're in. So it's one that people want. But because they change often, it can sometimes be hard to compare those zip codes over time. A zip code tabulation, a tabulation area, is something that the Census Bureau created in order to try to produce data that was useful for people that wanted zip code type data, but make it a little more usable from a statistical standpoint. So what we do is every 10 years, we will ingest all the boundaries. So in 2010, in 2020, we ingested the current boundaries from the US Postal Service for zip codes, and then we freeze them for 10 years. So in most cases, they will be very close to the zip codes, especially if you live in an area where population is pretty static. They'll be similar, but these are not technically exactly zip codes. They are frozen for 10 years based on that reference year back to the decennial census. Any questions on that? Because I know that that can be really complicated, and I know how popular zip codes are for data. Katie, do you mind reading me any questions? A couple chats that are.
Yeah, it looks like we do have one question. Are you saying that if you look for a place whose boundaries have changed, you'll get the current boundaries? So I asked for 2015 population of X, and I get 2015 population of the 22 boundaries for X.
Good question, and thank you for asking it. No. So for 2015, any data we publish, and I'll show you the reference years here. The 2015 data will be for 2015 geographies. For 2022, it'll be the 2022 data will be for 2022 boundaries. So there will be a reference year for every single data point that we publish, and you'll be able to tell, but it'll be the boundaries as they were in that reference year. Does that answer your question? Hopefully, if not, we can certainly go back into it some more. Next along this list here is metropolitan statistical areas. Again, these are our most commonly and most popular geographies. And again, they're probably a little different than what you're used to. Metropolitan statistical areas are not controlled by the Census Bureau. These are ingested as well, but they're pretty stable. They're pretty static. And there are some areas where there will be multiple versions. Harris County seems to have lots of different versions of metropolitan statistical areas. We'll publish for all of them that are recognized. Under tracks, this is where you get into the really fun part. And actually, after a break, I'm going to walk you through this really cool slideshow of exactly how tracks change over time. I wanted to go through the data a little bit first. I think it's easier to understand to then come back to the geographies. Census tracks are something that maybe that's why I like them so much. The Census Bureau completely controls census tracks. And the reason that they were established and the reason we maintain them is because we did have this comparability over time issue. So starting in, actually it was like 1910 in some areas, but basically by 1960, every single piece of land in the country, and actually let me be more specific, by 1990, actually every single piece of land in the country was covered by a census tract. There are no gaps and there are no overlaps. So wherever you are sitting right now, you are in exactly one census tract and only one census tract. So what's great about that is the entire country is covered. You can always understand exactly what census tract you're in, and we normalize them as much as we can by trying to make them areas that have approximately 4,000 people in them. What's really awesome about that is it's sometimes very hard to say compare a small town to a large city, or a county that is a smaller population to a very large county. Because each of these census tracts has approximately, and it's not perfect, but approximately the same number of people, it makes comparing two populations in two different census tracts much easier. The other thing that census tracts allow you to do is, and we'll walk through this slideshow, again, I want to get through the data a little bit, so there's a little bit more of a reference to go back to it. Every 10 years, we might, because of population growth, say if this is a census tract, we might split them to make smaller pieces of geography to get them back down to that 4,000 person threshold. But we'll always keep the outside boundaries the same. So you can always go back and recreate the decennial before and recreate the decennial before and decennial before. So it's the only geography we have that you can go back and compare decade to decade to decade, where you're literally looking at the same piece or pieces of land. So you don't have to worry about, New York City was very different in 1800 than it is now. Any major metropolitan area has changed a lot. Census tracts, for as long as we have them going back to your city, town area, you can absolutely rebuild them to go back to every single decennial census with the exact same boundaries on the outside. Questions about that? Because census tracts are our biggest and most often used statistical area. Okay, blocks, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on blocks or block groups today unless somebody mentions that they use them. Blocks are literally the smallest polygon, if you're a GIS person, that we can draw on the ground. We literally, through 2010, had somebody go stand on a corner of the intersection of two streets and turn right and turn right and turn right until they got back to where they started. That's a census block. It's the smallest piece of land that we can produce numbers for humans and housing. It's great for redistricting. It is great for distribution of federal funds. Because it's such a low level, I don't think we're going to spend a whole lot of time on it here. It's just so small that it's sometimes hard to be relevant for, I think, a lot of the work that you'll be doing. And then block groups, last but not least, before we start diving into this, are groups of blocks. So they are the sub-level. So it goes counties, and then census tracts nest within counties, census block groups nest within census tracts, and then blocks nest within those. We'll go through an animation here just in a little bit, but that's a quick overview of the main geographies that we publish for, and I think the main geographies that you'll be using in your work or should be using for the data that we're going to talk about. Does anyone have any questions about geography before I start pulling up some data here? Okay, I'm also going to be focusing on American Community Survey. Katie and I talked about this earlier. I think you're going to want more detail. So how we start here, let's look at just states. So let's start higher, and then we'll start digging down to lower levels. So we'll look at states. For most of the geographies we publish, we'll have whatever that geography is. So all states within the country, or all census tracts within the counties, or all counties within the nation. So you'll be able to choose all of them if you want to, which we will here because these are fairly easily understood. It'll pop down once you've highlighted this. This search has been saved. It'll pop over here, all states within the United States. Keep an eye on this. I call it your cart. I personally do this a lot. I think a lot of my colleagues do as well. You'll choose something, you'll forget it's there, and then when you go look at your search results, it can be confusing what you're looking at, or you'll think you clicked on something and we didn't actually get that response. So this is the filter. We're going to just be working through all of these to whittle it down. So start with geography, assuming you know what geography you're looking for, because then it will only give you the data options for those geographies. So this is really simple. This is not rocket science. You'll be able to hopefully walk away with this with enough information. If you just need a topic, I wouldn't worry too much about, we've got surveys and years here, and we will talk about those. But if you know what specific topic you're going for, this is your next step. And it should be pretty easy for you to find what you're looking for. We always put at the top of the list the searches that are most commonly used. If you're ever looking for something really abstract or you have a really specific, unique question, you can always reach out to me. But this should be set up in a way that's pretty easy for you to walk through. So I'll walk through each of these subcategories quickly, but here's information about businesses and economy. I don't think that applies too much to this group, but if you do, we have lots of different surveys. And what's nice about this topics tab is it's not going to bog you down with where did this data come from, what year was it? It will just give you the types of information we have and you can just choose them. So that's business and economy. Under education, this is maybe something that comes closer. So we have both education, educational attainment, and school enrollment. So if you want to understand what educational attainment people have in an area, you can look here. A quick note on that, we don't start asking that question until people are 25, simply because we don't want to skew data with people like my 6-year-old who is hopefully planning on being more educated, just isn't there yet. So educational attainment is asked for 25 and older. But you can also look at school enrollment. So if you're looking to understand who's in school and what age groups, you can choose that here as well. Under employment, we have a lot of really good information from a lot of different sources here. So if you're looking to understand what industries people work in, what their occupations are, we have a lot of information about commuting. Everybody is stuck in traffic recently. It's going to be interesting to see the blip happens during COVID, but you can look at how much time people are having to spend in a car. And then we also have information about job losses and creation. So if somebody is unemployed, what sectors they came from and where they went. Families and living arrangements can be a little confusing. The way that we define, well, let's start with children, is anybody under the age of 18. For families and households, the way that we define a family is somebody living in the same physical structure. So that a household is the physical structure part. You are a family if you are related by either blood, marriage, or adoption. And then if you aren't related by those three things, you're not a family, you're just a household. So we get a lot of questions about that. The data is very different for them. So you might be surprised, or you might not be, how different family households and regular households are when you're looking at different data. So for most everything we publish both of those separately. So just depending on what you're looking for, you can see that information here. We have marital status, and then we do have information on same-sex couples. Finally, that was something that we added, I believe, just after the 2010 census. So we finally have some good data there as well. Katie, jump in anytime if I'm missing anything. Just a quick touch on governments. We actually do a census of governments, which just asks about spending and functionality. I don't believe anybody here is going to be super into that specific topic, so I won't go too far into it. But if you do need information about governments in your area, you can look there. Health, I know with the roster, we saw several people in the health industry or healthcare. We have been better recently about how we collect data for household people and household health. So we have information about disability. There are 5 categories here. So we ask, and all of this is, we're asking the person, do you feel you have a disability? So we're not saying like, prove it, or we need documentation. It's, do you feel that you have a disability that falls under one of these categories? We have vision, hearing, mobility, cognitive, and self-care. So we can tell you for an area what percentage of people have disabilities within those categories. And you can also find out what percentage of those people live alone, which is something that a lot of people may need to know to understand the certain needs of a community. We have health insurance. We did a much better job of collecting that in the last 10 years. So you can look at what percentage of people have health insurance in your area, and then also where they get it from. So is it through a federal program? Is it through their job? Is it Medicaid, Medicare, things like that. Housing is about the physical structure. So do you rent or own your home? We also have information on vehicles available that falls under here, how many bedrooms there are, just basic housing stuff, what year it was built. We have some basic information about plumbing, that question about toilets that everyone gets frustrated about. You can find that here. But basically under housing, we are talking about the physical structure or things associated with it, like vehicles available, or plumbing, or different facilities that are available in it or on the same property. Income and poverty, I think this is one of the most, I know it's one of the most popular data points that we produce. There's a lot of different sources from it, but here's where you will look at poverty for an area. Usually how we publish it is we will ask a household, did you fall below this threshold in the last 12 months? So when you look at our poverty data, sometimes it'll look a little high to people. It's not who's living in poverty today. So you'll look at, say, it's 20% for an area, that'll seem really high. It'll be that percentage of people, either the household or the family, fell below the poverty line in the last 12 months. We also produce information per capita. So we produce it per capita, by household, and by family. So depending on what you're looking for and what you are most trying to understand, those are the 3 ways that we mostly publish income and poverty. Getting close to the end here. Population and people. I'm not going to go too far into these. There's a couple that we've done a better job of publishing that I do want to mention. Language spoken at home is a data point that we've done better with publishing useful information here, I feel like, in the last few years. So we used to just ask, what language do you speak at home? And that wasn't necessarily super insightful to an area. So say you're looking to communicate with a neighborhood and you need to understand what language barriers might be there. The fact that somebody says speak Spanish at home doesn't mean that there's a language barrier, right? They could very well speak English perfectly. They just also happen to speak Spanish at home. So what we started doing is asking that as a 2-part question. So we'll say, do you speak a language other than English at home? And then if the answer is yes, we'll collect data on what language that is, but we'll also ask, do you feel that you speak English well? This has been really important for the decennial census. This is really important if you're trying to reach out or understand community and how to best communicate with a community or neighborhood, because you can look at where those language barriers really are, not just where there are pockets of people that speak a certain language. We have information on older population. America is getting older quickly, so we've got information there, as well as how many grandparents live with, basically how many extended families there are, how many people are living in intergenerational households. And then we have information on veterans and residential mobility. The point I'll touch on residential mobility is we ask each household, did you live here last year? If the answer is yes, we say, okay, great. If the answer is no, we'll say, did you live in the same county? If the answer is no, we'll say, did you live in the same state? If the answer is no, we'll say, did you live in the same country? And if the answer is no, we'll say, which country did you move from? So not only can you tell, everybody jokes, I'm in Austin, Texas, everybody jokes that everybody here is coming from California. That is true, we have the data to back it up. So not only can we tell you how much mobility there is in an area, we can tell you where people are moving from. Questions there? I think that was the last. Oh, no, one more. Race and ethnicity, I think we covered this, but race is one of 4 categories: white, Black, Asian, Native American, or Pacific Islander. And then on the Hispanic or Latino, it depends on where you're looking at it, but that'll be called ethnicity. So we either are Hispanic or Latino, or you are not. And those data points will always add up to 100. It's an either or question. That is it. What questions do you guys have for me? I don't believe I'm explaining it so well that it's just perfectly understandable. I promise next we're going to pull up my favorite tables. But any questions on that? So if you're just looking for a topic, this is the quick and easy way to do it. Start here. Most of the time, it doesn't matter what survey it came from, what census, what year, the most popular ones will always come up to the top. Let me just show you really quickly how this will look. So let's go to income and poverty. We've already have all states within the United States. We'll click on poverty and we'll just choose poverty because it's just the most straightforward. I'll go down here, and again, it popped up right here. We'll go to search, and it will produce, we have 4 different tabs here. These are, out of all of the things, so the table, maps, and pages, these are the most popular and most often chosen results from some similar search. So at the very top, we have poverty status in the past 12 months. I think we've covered that. So this is every single thing that came up. So it could be maps, it could be an article. Usually at the very top are going to be tables. Most of the time you're going to want to click here. I kind of wish it defaulted to this, but you're going to go to tables. So these are the most common and most popular tables with these search results. It will always put up at the top. So you'll see here, and this will be for every single search. We'll go through about 5 of these, and this will start making a lot of sense. It's the same search, the results look the same every time, and then you just choose geography, you choose your topics, and then you'll understand what you're looking at. So here for this very first table, we have this very governmenty sounding S1701. The good news is, while that reference number is very governmenty, it does help you go back in time if you want to look at the same table. It's here, it says we have all 18 products. If you click on this, so the most recent data will always come up to the top. So we have ACS 1-year estimates, but you can also go back if you wanted to compare in time. So right now it is displaying the most recent. So we've got 2019 ACS 1-year estimates. It's always going to give you the most recent version. But if you want to go back in time and compare over time, you can walk through. You can either choose one of these, or you can use this drop-down table as well. This is what it looks like. This is what our data. Why is my cursor? We were having this problem the other day. There it is. I'm gonna get rid of this. So this is what our tables look like. Again, this is not. We're going to go through some more flashy tools that'll produce some more cool things, but this is what a basic table looks like. On the left, you'll have all of your different data points. So this has a lot of information about sex and race by poverty. So you'll see, for each state, you'll have the total number, and that's the total number of humans. Every single data point we have for every single geography has a margin of error, so you can understand how reliable that specific data point is at that specific geography. And then we have the percentage the total number of people or households that fell below the poverty level in the last 12 years. And then we have the percent. So we just basically did the math for you. While it doesn't seem like a big deal that we're finally, dividing the number of humans by the number of the people that were under poverty by the number of total humans in the area. It's really helpful. I used to have to do a lot of this math. So we'll publish this almost for every data point you'll look at, or the common ones. And then you just go across. So if you want to compare your state to other states, this is a quick and easy way to do it. If you want to download the entire thing in a CSV file, you are back here. So if you want to download you can download tables here. This will produce a CSV file. I'm not going to do it right now, but we'll walk through that later. Most of the time, depending on how massive the file is, I don't remember the cutoff. If you're not looking at something huge, which if you are, a CSV file is great. If you're used to looking at huge amounts of data, you know how to do that anyways. Pretty straightforward, just a little bit more manipulation to make it a product you'll want to use. We finally just within the last couple of months added this Excel download feature, which just makes life a lot easier if you want to have something that's quick and easy to use. You can click export to Excel. We're about to find out if this file is too big. No, it's not. Okay. So as long as it's not a massive file, you can download it to Excel. If it's a really big file, so with a lot of geographies, it's usually the number of geographies, you will have to do it as a CSV file and do a little bit of manipulation to get it into something a little more put together. Here, there's 2 pages on all of the Excel downloads from data.census.gov. The first one tells you what you're looking at, which is, as silly as it sounds, pretty helpful because you cannot imagine how many times I think I remember what I'm looking at and I don't. So top screens here. So on the first page, we'll tell you the table number, the survey, the year, all that good stuff that may or may not matter to you. And then on the second page is where we actually see the data. So it should be very similar to what you saw on the previous screen, but this is what it'll look like. Questions about this? So we're going to walk through several more iterations of this. I'm going to focus on a couple of tables. I'll focus on a couple just tricks for dealing with the specific tool, but it's really going to be very similar. I think after we do a few more of these, you'll really understand what your options are, and depending on what you're looking for, your best way to find this data and use it. Any questions on the very basic function? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I do have one question. Can you explain a little bit more about what the margin of error is and like how we can understand that metric?
Sorry, caffeine. Yes. So this is a complicated one. I get a lot of questions about margin of error. So again, and this is important. We do publish for every single data point we have has its own margin of error. That confuses a lot of people. Usually there's like a margin of error associated with a survey or something at a higher level. We publish it for every single data point. So that means by every geography and every topic. The reason that we do that is so that you can personally make a decision based on how reliable you feel that data point is and how usable you feel it is for the specific purpose that you're using it for. So let me back up and say, we won't publish anything that has a margin of error so large that we don't feel like that number is statistically sound or significant. So you will see every now and then here where you see N, that means that we didn't feel that the estimate was good enough for some reason. It's usually because the margin of error is so large that we felt it wasn't a responsible data point to publish. So you never have to worry about finding a data point and thinking, this is so crazy, there's no way I should be able to use it, or there's no reason I should use it. We wouldn't publish it if it failed certain statistical testing. But for everything else, so let's just look at the top here, Alabama. I talk about Alabama so much because it's just the first A on all of our spreadsheets. But so we'll have the estimate for the number of people, period. So this is just the number of people in Alabama. The margin of error, that means we are, these are published to the, I should have said that first, these are published to the 90% confidence level. So we are 90% confident that the actual number of human beings in Alabama falls between 4,781,688 plus or minus 3,063. So most of the time it's good to know. Like I said, we won't publish it if we feel like it's irresponsible or unusable. Always walking that line, trying to get my words out. So we won't publish it if we don't feel like, if it fails certain statistical testing. That is what that means. So it's to a 90% confidence interval for all of the American Community Survey data, which is what we'll be focusing on today. And then you can decide for yourself, and it depends on what you're using it for, what you feel about that data point. Most commonly when I get a question like, should I use this data point? Is this reliable enough? Is the margin of error too big? The truth is, and my most common answer, which kind of seems like a cop-out, is if it's the only estimate available for what you need, then yes, use it. Most of the time what we're looking at here, this is the data that's available for these geographies with these data points. So I know that's kind of vague, but yeah, these are all to 90% confidence intervals. That's what margin of error means. The smaller geography you're looking at, the bigger the margin of error will be, because we've had a smaller sample. So the smaller the number of responses we get for whatever, either by topic. So here, say, there weren't that many people in Alabama that identified as Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, or if it's because you're looking at a really small geography, say a census tract. There's often times where we don't publish a certain data point because, again, we just don't have enough surveys with those two different responses. Questions there? Does that work, Katie?
Yes, that answers my question.
Okay. No, absolutely. Okay, so that was our first search. So just start with, I'm going to close out here. We're going to start back over. I'll show you the easiest thing to do is just clear all, but we will start back over. Yes, I am sure. And I know this sounds silly, for your own sanity, click that clear all button. If you press back, sometimes it will empty your cart, sometimes it will not. There is a rhyme or reason to it. I still have not been able to figure it out. So it can be really frustrating. You think that there are things or aren't, there are or aren't. So, and then when you click on United States Census Bureau, this is the one place on our website where it actually will just take you back to data.census.gov, not back all the way to the beginning. So we're going to go through another search. So that's your basic. So if you just need a certain geography and a certain data point, that's the easy way to do it. You start with geography, and then you go under topics. If you know for sure that there is a certain survey you want to look at, can you guys type in the chat if that's something that, is there ever a time where you're like, I need a data point that needs to be from either a census or the American Community Survey or the economic census? Is that ever something that is a big deal, like what the actual source of the information is? I think the answer is no, but if I'm wrong, I want to find out now. Okay, I don't see anybody saying yes. I'll show you what's here. The American Community Survey is the one we talked about. It's the most popular. And again, we'll take a break here between data.census.gov and when we go into some of the fancier stuff, we'll walk through a few more details there, and I'll send you a list of the data and topics here. But American Community Survey, then we have decennial census, so that's once every 10 years. The decennial census of island areas is the same thing. We're just doing it in the island areas. The economic census is the main produces the most comprehensive data for the economic situation in the United States. It's done every 5 years. Again, I don't think that that's something that this group is going to be super focused on. This data can be a little hard to work with because it's quickly outdated. It's only every 5 years. But if you're looking for economic census of islands areas, the same thing. If you're looking to understand the economic situation for your area, economic surveys are usually a better place. Population estimates are a program where we do modeling. So this is not actually from a household survey. This is not from a census. We start with a baseline from the census and we add a bunch of multipliers to try to estimate populations in areas. And then public sector, this is going to be your census of governments. So if you did know what survey, and it's possible in the future, you'll find out that you're applying for a grant and they require a certain survey, this is where you could narrow that down if you want to. Under years, this is where you could choose the years as well. I almost never use this years category simply because when you choose your search results, the way that we have it now, it'll let you choose the year once you're already into that section. So I haven't found a whole lot of use for this. In the past, we didn't have that additional functionality. There is one table or one set of tables that I want to mention here, and I know this sounds silly. I will send this out in the chat when we take a break. They are called the well, actually, I'll show you. So I get a lot of questions on, okay, if I want to have an understanding and an overview of an area, where should I start? There is a product we produce from the American Community Survey called Data Profiles. There are 4 of them. And what they do is give you a really nice overview without getting too far into the weeds. There are 4 of them. We publish them all the way down to the Census Tract, and that's the next thing I'm going to walk you through. And I think they're super easy to use and very, it's just a really good product. We publish a data profile for social, which means information about education and how people are living, race, ethnicity, all that stuff. We have so social, economic, which is the economic situation of a household, where do people work, things like that. The next one is housing. So this is a physical characteristics of the household. And then the last one is demographic, which has some overlap. I'm going to show you all of these. But the demographic profile is literally asking the same exact questions that we asked the previous census. So for the 2019 American Community Survey, if you're looking at the data profile for demographics, we asked the exact same questions in 2010. So you can literally compare the last decennial census to the ACS, so you don't have that huge gap. The way that you find that is, and I'm still going to start with geography. Does anybody have a county that they want me to use here as an example? It'll be, we're going to look at Census Tracks, but if anybody wants to type into the Cook County, and I assume Illinois, if that's not correct, let me know. But we're going to look at Census Tracks. Okay, awesome. Census Tracks within Cook County. So, like I said, and we'll go through this a little bit too. Every Census Tracks nests within counties. So I'm going to walk you through how to do this. So start with the geography you're going to end up with. So for Census Tracks, and I think this is going to be a really, really common one, you'll go to Census Tracks. Then if you want to choose a lower level of geography, you do not want to choose every census tract in the country unless you really, really, really have a lot of time and energy on your hands. But you can narrow it down here. So you could use all census tracts in Illinois. That's still going to be a lot of data, but you could do it if you needed that. Or you can go and specifically choose the county that you want to look at all census tracts. Now, if you knew which census tracts, and I'll show you how to map these so you can kind of understand where they are. This will shock you, but not everybody knows exactly where the census tract boundaries are for their area. I literally don't know my own census tract right now, which is a little embarrassing. I need to find it out so I can at least tell people I know mine. You click here if you want every census tract within Cook County, which is a really good way to do it because, again, no gaps and overlaps. You're looking at the whole thing. If you want to choose just specific census tracts, you have the ability to do that too. You can choose as many or as few as you like. I'm going to choose all census tracts here. It popped over all census tracts within Cook County, and we're looking at Illinois, where I grew up. I grew up in Chicago. Then under topics, under surveys. This is where you're going to find the data profile. It's a little counterintuitive. I know this is being recorded, so you can always just come back here if you need this specifically, because I think this is really useful. Under surveys, you're going to go American Community Survey, 5-year estimates, and then you're looking at data profiles. So I'm going to walk back through that just so that it's here, because this is the one part that's not counterintuitive, and I focus on it because the vast majority, and I really mean like 90% of the data requests I get can be filled with these products. So under survey, so we already chose always choose your geography first. These are only published down to the census tract. That's the lowest geography that's available for these specific products. You go to surveys, American Community Survey, and it usually goes to 5-year estimates and then data profiles. It'll pop over here and we'll go to search. So here are of course they are out of order just to mess with me, but here are the data profiles. These are published for every single census tract in the country. They go back at least to, I want to say 2006, but they go back at least 10 years. And they are a really great way to understand the community, understand how your census tract compares to other census tracts in your area, with giving you enough information, but not too much. This is also an awesome way, we're going to walk through it, to understand what data is available from the American Community Survey. So this is a great place to ask me what a data point means, how it's best to use those, anything along those lines. I don't know why, other than just to mess with me, these are out of order. DP2 is the social, these are just, weird government numbers, but social characteristics are usually first, economic characteristics are second, here's your housing characteristics, and here, last but not least, is the thing that you can compare to the previous decennial census. So let's start with social. These social, and then, of course it is. I am going to, who is a smaller county? I saw this one. Brewster County, Texas. It's a quick opportunity to go back. So you can do this. You know, let me show you what this looks like. If you're downloading a table, if you're looking at a lot of data, Cook County has a lot of tracks. We're about to find out how many. To download the table, this is how you'll download a CSV. So I'll show you this because we were going to get there anyway. PDF is not an option. You'll download CSV. It will tell you what you're downloading before you do it. So you can double check that here. This is your most recent data, but you can choose as many or as few as you'd like. And let me show you what the download looks like here. So to download now, it's this really not fancy zip file. There are 3 different files in every single download that you do from data.census.gov. We'll extract all. You know what? I'm going to skip that. Let me just scroll this over. So the first one that will have the smallest, and you can always just see which one it is by it's the smallest, but here are your metadata. What this is going to give you is the headings for all of the data. So none of this is hard. This is not difficult. You can all do this. It's just a little more time consuming than, say, the Excel file that's already created it. So here are basically, these are all of the categories. So this is all of the categories. These are your the definitions of each of these variables. And then here is the actual data. Again, not hard to combine. It's just a little bit annoying. So this is what it looks like. So you can manipulate this pretty easily to get it to something a little more usable. I'm going to go back and use a smaller example so we can look at it, be interactive on the screen. But any questions about this? Like I said, it's not hard. It's just a little bit clunky, and it's 1 or 2 more steps. I'm about to sneeze, so I'm going to mute you, and then I'm going to come back and answer a question about the 2020 data. Central Texas right now has a lot of pollen. I don't know if anybody else is in a similar area struggling with that. So I have a question. When will the 2020 data be available? So for the American Community Survey, we are looking at a March release. That is late for us. Normally the 5-year data is produced in December. We are behind because of the pandemic. I should also caution you, so with the, you know what, we're going to come back to that later. I'm going to leave that there. The 2025-year data will be available in March. So, and that's noteworthy, you know, so if you are looking to make some major moves here and manipulate a bunch of data, it's good to know when the next release is so you'll know how soon the data will be outdated and then decide if that matters or not. Okay, questions on CSV, that's how this looks. I did not save this. Okay, I don't see anything else there. And I'm going to go back and I believe, so let's just start over with this one more example of how to walk through this. Advanced search, always start with geography. And I believe I saw, yeah, Brewster County, Texas. So we're going to do census tracks again. Again, when you're choosing this geography, and this can be confusing too, you choose the geography you want to end up with. So we'll go to track, go down to Texas. And we'll look at, I'm a terrible speller. My mother was a librarian and she still makes fun of me in a cute way about not understanding alphabetical order, no matter how hard I try. I'm a numbers person, I just couldn't make the switch. So this is much more manageable to be looking at this data point. We'll do all census tracks within Brewster County. So just for reference, there is no limit to how many tracks there can be in a county, but however large your county is, so I'm just making up a round number, you divide the total population by 4,000. It should be approximately that number of census tracts. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is awesome. It's a super manageable number. That's not always the case, but it popped over here, all census tracts within Brewster County. Then we go back to surveys, American Community Survey, 5-year estimate, and data profiles. And we should get something much more user-friendly. Yes, much more user-friendly and still out of order. But here, let's start with the DP2, the social characteristics. This is absolutely my favorite tool. And like I said, the vast majority of questions I get, this is the product I send people and people seem to be happy with it. So I'm gonna move this back over. Along the left column, along this column, it will have, these are again, it's detailed enough, but not too specifically detailed. So just gives us information about how people are living in these tracks. So all the different tracks are across the top here. I'm going to actually export this into Excel just to be a little easier to walk through if we want to highlight it. But here's export to Excel. And I can make it a little bigger, so hopefully you can all see it a little bit better. This is the landing page, the home page, gives you some overview about the data you're looking at. And then here under data, you'll see the actual numbers. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, hoping that that makes it easier to see. Can you guys all see that it should have 2 tracks at least? Hopefully. Tell me if that's not the case. But down the side here, we have total households. So that's just the number of housing units that are inhabited, information about who's living within them. So you have married couple families, cohabitating couples, information about people that are 65 and older, 65 and older living alone, which can be a really important data point for people to understand. Then you have information about the relationships within the household. So the head of household, unlike we used to do back in like the 40s and 50s, it's just whoever the respondent is. So this is not, the oldest male in the house or anything like that. We get that question a lot too. It's just the person that filled out the questionnaire. But you can understand what the dynamics are of that household. So the person filling it out, this is the relationship to the other people in the household's relationship to that householder. Information about marital status. We have fertility, which means did you have a live birth in the last 12 months? Then we have it broken down a little bit by the number of people in different ages. Number of grandparents living with their own grandchildren is a data point that's gotten a lot more attention, especially during the pandemic. My parents moved in for a bit, so we saw a lot when kids were home, when school was shut down, when people were kind of hunkering down together. There's some really cool data looking at year to year on grandparents living at home. Here's school enrollment. So we don't start asking until 3. I do understand there are some children that are 2 that are in what is considered a school. Technically, for our purposes, we don't ask till 3. Anything before that for data side is childcare. But you can look here, so you can understand what the ages are and what people are enrolled in school. And then we have information on educational attainment. This is the one I mentioned, and it, thank goodness, says that here. I didn't realize it did. This is for the population 25 years and older. I do understand that there are people who are still in school at 25, and that could be because they're getting a PhD, or it could be because they're just taking a little longer than it takes some other people. But that was a decision that was made. We needed a threshold that was justifiable, basically. So most people are finished with their education at that point. We had to have a cutoff at some point, so it's 25. Just remember that when you're looking at those data points. We have veteran status. Here are the disability that we talked about. We do have, and in all of these, we'll have more specific information under all of these. This is just your overview. So the data profiles give you a really nice overview, at least in my opinion. Information on age for people with a disability. Residence a year ago, that's when we ask, did you live in the same house? If not, were you in the same county, same state, different state, and then out of the country. Place of birth, this is just high-level overview information. Citizenship, we have information on the year that the household entered the country if they were born outside of the country. Here's basic information on language spoken at home. And then you'll see here, sorry, it's a little bit of scrolling. Language spoken at home. We don't start asking until you're 5. We don't ask, 3-month-old baby, so what's your favorite language to speak at home? It's funny, until I had a child, I didn't quite understand how silly I was not thinking of these things before. But we have information about what language people speak, and then do you feel that you speak language well? If the answer is no, that's where you'll see these differences. So you speak Spanish, and you speak Spanish less than very well. Again, we have more detailed information, but this will give you a quick overview. Ancestry, we can tell you where people, heritage, this isn't where they were born, but just where their lineage is. And down at the very bottom, we have computer and internet use, which always seems kind of like a random addition at the very end of this, but that's something that we've been collecting for a while too. And you can really see changes in how people use data. Data is one way to put it, but how people use the internet. So it used to be much more, we had a lot more people at home with a modem and a line, especially younger people now are much more often using not using a broadband internet subscription, but are using their phone or some kind of hotspot. Questions on these. So there are 4 main categories we'll go through here. There are 4 main tables, and they are also the 4 main categories that are published by the American Community Survey. So instead of kind of walking you through this, well, these are the 4 main topics published by the ACS, and I want to make sure you know what's here and how to use it. Just scroll across this way so you can keep as much of this as you want. A lot of times I will take out the margins of error depending on my audience. You'll probably make the decision that it's an estimate that works or doesn't. If you take out the margins of error, it cuts down your columns by half, which just can make it easier to look at. But you can scroll across. So let's just scroll up here. Let's pick a data point. Here's one, grandparents responsible for grandchildren. Let's highlight this. And then we'll scroll over. So the estimate for percentage of grandparents living with, so this is out of people that are living with their grandchildren, what percentage or what number are responsible for the main care of their grandchild. There's information here about breakdown of age, but just as a first shot, we've got 120 people that are responsible in this census tract, and that's 65.6%. So that's a high number. Over here, if we look at the adjacent census tract, so we're looking at almost 0%. That's interesting. I don't know what's going on there exactly. Then we go back over one more. We're back up to 65%, which is high again. So it's a really quick and easy way to be able to do comparison, and then we have 65.3. So that's one example. Let's pick another one. Let's look at educational attainment, because that's actually usually an easy one to see some interesting differences. And we're looking tract to tract right now, but this is the smaller geography you go to census tract is the smallest here, the more interesting the changes are, because they are, it's a suburban area or it's a, downtown area where it's more young people. So you can really see different changes. So bachelor's degree, so we have 28.5% of the population in this census tract has a bachelor's degree or higher. The adjacent census tract has 17.2, which is a big difference. We go back up to 29.4 in this census tract, and I'm scrolling over too fast. So 29.4, 17.2, but hopefully this illustrates census tract is a really great geography. It's big enough for us to publish all this data, but it's the smallest big enough we have. So we'll cut it down and produce at a low level, but you can really see the differences and changes. These are even smaller than zip codes. Let's see, I see a question. Katie, can you read me? Is there any way to set the columns for overall numbers? So the question is there a way to set columns for overall number estimate per county next to each other? So you would just have to manipulate that within Excel. So there's not a way to do it within our system. So the way this is published, you could do it from the very, let me back up here. If you wanted to do something and not be looking at this table, you can always go back to the beginning here and just choose that data point under topics. So you pick the geography, and if you really don't want all of this, you can just go pick the topic and you would choose the estimate and not the percentage. So this is creating a lot more than you might need. If that's the case, okay. But it does give you a good overview. If you just want something more specific, the easier and better way to make a quick product of side-by-side data is pick your geography and then pick the topic. Questions here, going once, going twice. Okay. I'm gonna go back to the tables here. So that was DP2, which is second on the list, gonna drive me crazy. Selected economic characteristics. This is one that confuses a lot of people, including me. When a lot of people think of economic data, you think of businesses and you think of the overall economy and imports and exports. These, everything from the American Community Survey, we're asking of the household. So we're saying, okay, here's your household. What is the household or the people's economic situation? So just something to remember here. So we have, I'm going to download this one to an Excel file too, just because it'll be easier to look at. Okay. Here's your overview page again, and next is data. A little bit bigger. so that hopefully I feel like this is easier to see than our website is. It's the exact same data. It should be very similar. It's just hopefully a little bit easier to look at. So we have employment status. We start asking that age at 16. Again, there are people below, younger than 16 that work. We picked a threshold. That's when we start asking. Information about, are you employed? Are you working? If you do, where are you working? We have information on commuting to work, and this is going to be really interesting, especially when we release 2020, just to see how that changed really quickly over time. So depending on where you live, hopefully this data will make sense to you when you look at it. I am currently in Texas. Everybody drives a truck, or it seems like everybody drives a truck. This is Texas as well. I've lived other places where almost no one had a car. So you can look at, are people driving? Are they using public transportation? Did they walk? Did they work from home? That's a number that's increased a lot recently. And the average number of minutes to get to work if you did travel to work. I will caution you, the number one complaint I get about, I think, truly any of our data sets is when you present to a group and they say, there's no way that commute to work time is correct, because everyone feels like they're stuck in traffic. So there are some people that are lucky to have short commutes, and it's bringing down the numbers for the people that have longer commutes. We have information about occupation, a little bit of a breakdown here on what industries people are working in. It doesn't go into a whole lot of detail. We do have more detail about industry, but you have to go up to a larger geography. So you'd have to go to like county to get more specific information. Next up, we have class of worker, which is something that's mostly used for very specific government programs. It's kind of an antiquated data point in a lot of ways. We have earnings. So this breakdown seems arbitrary, and it feels arbitrary to me. Again, each of these specific breakdowns are produced by the Census Bureau because they specifically correspond with a program. So either grants or distribution of federal funds is based on these thresholds. So that's why it's a little weird when you look at them, like why are they're uneven in their separation of between the highs and lows. That's why. And then we have mean and median household income. So you can look at that across the board. And we have information, some basic information about where people got their money from. So was it through just earnings, Social Security, retirement income, cash public assistance? And then we have some information on food stamps and SNAP. Again, here's your family income, which again, family is any household where people are related by blood, marriage, or adoption. And then health insurance coverage. So not only do you have health insurance coverage, but where did you get it? So was it through private, or was it a public coverage? And down here at the bottom, the percentage of people who fell below the poverty line in the past 12 months. So we have families. We also have information on householders and specifically children or people over the age of 65, just depending on what you're looking for. Questions on this, and we'll scroll across to look at some differences. Let's look at.
There was a comment, that the fear of the current climate of like my rights and general distrust of government oversight and concerns about information privacy will interfere with inaccurate counting more than ever before. I know the census has run into that before. And then continuing off of that, are there any ongoing educational programs to have the public understand why this information is important? Generally, the only time we hear about the census is the year before the decades that the survey will be taken.
Yeah, we're not immune to. So a couple of things. We have, what we try to do is when we go to a household to do a survey, or when we have some type of survey that we're operating, we try to make sure that, because it's a relatively small sample for the public, we don't do like mass advertising. We do try to communicate with households or families that we're interviewing why. I used to supervise survey collection. The vast majority of the time that we got somebody calling, they were upset for normal reasons. Somebody showed up at their house, they were asking a whole bunch of personal questions. Almost, and I truly mean this, 9 times out of 10, we could have a conversation about what the data is used for, what the purpose is, and they were fine. So we try to have more of those one-on-one conversations, because I do realize, and this is something we've all struggled with, we were high profile for about 6 months because of the decennial census. then we're operating all the time, and it can be hard for people to understand what this data is used for. So we do have those one-on-one conversations, and then we do more outreach. Hopefully we're doing better about sharing our data, so we can actually say like, hey, you can go look at what this data is used for. We have information about what every single question we ask, what public policy and distribution of federal funds that is tied to. And then last but not least, and this is not what we try to push, and we really don't, is these are required by law. So you're required by law to respond to both Decennial and the American Community Survey. But it certainly is and a lot of times, depending on who you're talking to or who you're reaching out to, it's a difficult, it's a quick learning curve because you really don't hear about us, you're right, except for every decennial census. So we try to have those one-on-one conversations and then share data and share reasons why that specific question is. There's usually like one question that pushes, like depending on the household, there's one question where like, that's it, I don't like it. And then we'll try to address that specific question or concern. And most of the time, once people realize you're not just asking them about their toilets because you wanted to bother them on a Friday afternoon, they're much more okay with it. It's a challenge. Was there anything else? Okay, I'm gonna look here at mean household income. I'll just highlight this. So if we're looking at the very first census tract here, and you'll notice there's no percentage just because we're looking at hard numbers. So for this first census tract, we have 65,000. Next up, we have 53,000. Go back up to 64. And then, am I missing a tract here? 1, 2, 3. There were more than 3. Maybe I'm wrong. And it may be that there's now, okay, actually, I know why that is. I'll explain that when we come back to our census splits. This is going to be a perfect example. Actually, I'm writing that down. Well done. Brewster County, making me a perfect example of how to compare tracts over time. And I don't have a pen. But you can look at really quickly and easily how different counties compare. Again, you could do this with zip codes. You could do this with counties, whatever geography. This is the main look here. Questions on income, because the next two are going to be really quick. And then I'm going to let us take a quick break, a 5-minute break. Then we'll come back, cover quickly geography changes. And then we'll go into some of the more fancy tools, which are using the same data, but create some products for you that are a little more fancy than these spreadsheets. Going once. Okay. Okay, so we'll go back to our search results here. I'm going to be really quick with the selected housing characteristics and the demographic, just because I don't think that there's a whole lot of need for them, but I want to make sure I answer any questions if they do exist. I'm not going to download this. But we have total number of housing units, the number of vacancies, units and structure. So, is it a massive apartment complex or is it a single detached family home? We have information on mobile homes and RVs. Year structures built is used most common. I got a free toilet when I lived in Dallas because it was like if your house was built before this time, they got you a free low flow toilet. This is also used a lot for if there's possibly a lead-based paint and there's a community outreach to address that, or asbestos. Rooms, you can just look at the total number of rooms. You can look at the median here. These matter in some places, they don't in others. Obviously, people in Manhattan live a lot differently than people in more rural Texas. So just make sure you have that context if you're comparing on a larger geographic level. Housing tenure, do you rent or do you own your home? Year that people moved in. This is good if you're trying to understand how stable not only the housing stock is, but the residential area. Heating fuel, depending on where you are, understanding how people heat their homes can be very important. Telephone, we use this to look at, it was originally set up to understand if there were deficiencies in housing. It's not necessarily the case as much anymore. Not having telephone service means something different than it did 30 years ago, but we still have that information here. And then we have owner, so we have value. The one thing I'll note here is everybody has that neighbor who thinks that like their house is the only $1 million house in the neighborhood, right? And then I have people like my fabulous parents who lived in the same house for 25 years and were shocked when they went and sold it and found out that it had appreciated in value. So we are asking the householder, what do you believe the value of your home is? They are telling us the truth. They just may be wrong. So the reason I point this out is this is one of this is probably the data point that if you compare it to other very good sources, so your county appraisal or housing sale records, these oftentimes will vary very significantly. And they're both good data sources. They're just very different. And that's the question I get most about discrepancies. Mortgage status. And then we have some basic information about how much money you're spending basically to keep a roof over your head. So we don't get into a whole lot of details of like which cable program you have, but what percentage of your income it's costing for basic sewage, water, trash collection, insurance, and either rent or mortgage payments. And we break that down by both rent and mortgage. And that's it. Any questions on that? Again, if you ever have questions, if it doesn't seem super relevant right now and down the road it is for you, let me know. We'll come back to it. Questions? Okay, awesome. And last but not least, and this one's really, really simple, the demographic and housing estimates. These are the American Community Survey, is equivalent of the decennial census. So you can always go back. So this is 2019. You can go back and compare this directly to the 2010 census. So that the further away we get, you can make those comparisons. And these questions were asked the exact same way that they were in 2010. So it'll look like a lot of this is repeat. The reason is it's the exact same question. So you're comparing apples to apples. But again, just those 5 basic questions that we asked for the decennial census. Questions here before we take a 5-minute break so I can let you all, your ears take a break, my voice take a break, and then we'll come back, go over Census Tracks splits, and we'll dive into some of the cool tools that make nice reports and mapping, anything along those lines. Katie, is there anything you want me to focus more or less on going forward? We'll walk through track splits. We'll walk through those changes. Does anyone have any questions about, in general, data.census.gov? I would, again, choose your geography. If you just have a topic, choose your topic. If you want to understand a community's overall, I would really suggest those data profiles. A quiet group.
Oh, it looks like we got a question in. Are there other options for downloading data for analysis in long format? For example, the CSV would need a lot of manipulation before using in a statistics program.
Yeah, so not from here. So we have an API, and depending on what you're looking for, sometimes the API, most of our surveys and censuses have their own APIs. And if you know what you're trying to create, a lot of times the API is just the easiest way to produce that data because it doesn't make you undo a lot of things that these systems are designed to do for you. So if you know what you want to bring it into SAS or whatever it is, or any kind of GIS software as well, the API might be a better bet. This is more for somebody who's looking for a more finished product that you're not taking into some other software to do manipulation from the start. What else? You're welcome. Okay, let's do 5 minutes. And Katie, if you want to type at me, oh wait, hang on. The survey that asks about the number of schools, playgrounds was mailed several times to my great aunt in an independent living apartment. Okay, how do they select her? I don't think that was our survey. So the question is, so there are a lot of surveys out there. Anybody can call any survey a census. Anybody can call anything they want. I don't believe that was a Census Bureau survey. So we do have I'll back up a bit. We have 130 ongoing surveys and censuses. We have massive operations going on across the country. If they are from the Census Bureau, it'll have a phone number, a way to reach out. You can always reach out to me. I will connect you to our regional offices, which will let you know if it's a legitimate survey, if it's from us. But there are a lot of surveys going on all the time that are not us. Some even try a little bit to make it sound like they had something to do with us. But I don't believe. Okay, so this is, you believe it was the government and your aunt's in Missouri. It's possible. Again, that specifically the playgrounds, I don't think we have a survey that we asked about that. But if you ever want to know, if you ever get a survey or you ever have a neighbor or friend who gets a survey, you can always reach out to me directly. We also have on our website, and I'll point that out too, there's literally a tab that says, I'll go there real quick. It should be surveys and programs, and there should be, so all surveys and programs, you can look here. But there should be if you get something in the mail or you get something, it should have a very specific code or key that'll tell you where to go. And if it doesn't take you to some part of census.gov, it's not a, there are other statistical agencies as well. But yeah, I don't know what else to say, but I don't know that one specifically. Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Katie, if there's anything you want to tell me, you can send me a chat, either private or to everyone. We'll come back, we'll go over geographic changes between decennials. We will look at, which should only take us about 5 minutes probably. We will talk about the difference between 1 year and 5 year ACS now that we've had a chance to look at it briefly, because that's tied to geography. And then we'll go straight into Business Builder, which I think is where we'll spend most of the rest of our time. It has some really cool reports and mapping features. Okay, awesome. I will talk to you all. It is 11:22 where I am. Let's come back at 11:27. Does that sound good to everyone? And then we'll have 30 more minutes to make sure we cover everything. Okay, perfect. Hey, everybody, I have 11:27. Oh, turn this back. I have 11:27 here. Hopefully everybody is back. What I'm going to walk through first, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through a really quick, easy PowerPoint presentation that shows how geographies nest, and then also how we do split or change tracks from decade to decade. So if you want to go back and compare over time, you'll know how to do that. Can everyone see my screen? I am sharing the wrong screen, I think.
You can see a map that shows Colorado. Like
oh, is that all you see? It's not. Okay, I thought I was on the wrong one. Okay. So yes, so this is the state of Colorado. One of the things I will say is that every state is way more unique than I understood when I started this job 18 years ago. Depending on where you live, the counties will be very different. The places will be very different. The census tracts, however, should not be. So as I mentioned before, counties perfectly nest within states. There are no gaps and overlaps. And I like Colorado because it's a nice rectangle. So counties cover all of the area of the state. We're going to look here at Denver. Depending on which state you're in, you will either have nicely shaped geographies or you won't. But this is Denver County. If we go down another level, this is just the county outline. Let's zooming in a little bit. So in the county, every single piece of land is covered by a tract. And I apologize for the animation here. This is really old, but it's one of my favorites because I think it does a nice job of illustrating. So these are all the census tracts within Denver County. This is actually from 2000, but I'll show you why we use this example. It's a really easy example to use. These are all the census tracts. We're going to zoom into this one in particular. So this is your tract level. We'll go one further. This is a census tract. These GeoIDs may matter to you. If you're a GIS person, you'll know what they mean. We can certainly talk about that if we need to, but otherwise I think it's getting a little too far in the woods. And then here we have a block group. So a block group is simply a group of blocks. Again, it will cover all of the area within the tract. And last but not least, we have the block. So here are all the blocks within that block group. We're going to specifically look here and end up with this block. So every block in the country has a unique identifier. This is what this specific block is. And this is literally the smallest geographical feature we could walk around in a corner. So if you take a walk around the block, if you walk the dog around the block, it's what it should be what you think of in your own neighborhood, in your own area. Other boundaries that are common are, say, if there's a river, if you live next to a major body of water, we'll end at that point. Roads are by far the most common. Railroad tracks are another thing. It's a semi-permanent something that we can see on the ground to say, okay, because we need to be able to see it, to tabulate, and we want whoever's using the data to be able to understand quickly and easily where those boundaries are and why. Questions about how these nest. So just to go back, actually I won't go back to them. Questions about how they all come together or how they're used? Okay, awesome. So next up, and this is one of my favorite examples, wrong way, sorry everybody. Okay, this is a real example. This is a real on the ground census tract change. So this is going to go through 2000. But what's awesome about this is it shows really normal, consistent population growth and therefore tract splits, which is pretty unusual. So most of the time, depending on where you live, there goes so where I live right now, 15 years ago was cow pasture, like actual cows. I came back to the area after working other places for a long time, and all of a sudden there's houses, right? And there's a neighborhood and there's roads. And so a lot of times it goes from 0 to mass population and then kind of stabilizes there. The reason we chose this example is because it does a more gradual build. It shows you how it changes decade to decade instead of kind of one of those one big fail swoops. But this is an imagery of a census tract in 1970. There were approximately 4,000 people in it coming up to the 1970 census. Over the course of the next decade, there was, and you can see in the imagery here, and actually I lied. So this is actually, go back. This was the 1970 census tract, and going into 1980, which is this one, so it's going to be the same background image, we actually estimated that there were 8,000 people here, so we had to split it in half. What we do when we split these in half is we will keep the outer boundaries the same and split the tract. And again, this is a good example because it just happens to be straight down the middle. It's basically in half geographically and in half population-wise, and we'll create 2 census tracts. If I go back one, you'll notice that this 1130, which in some terms we had like a 0.00, goes away. So now what we do is we call that retiring it. So that this piece of land will always be 1130.00, always, forever. We won't be publishing data for it anymore, but you will never have to worry about confusing a census tract number with one that is retired or in the past. Now we have, for the 1980 census, we had 2 different census tracts that covered the same original area. And they had suffixes. What's the one at the end? Decimals. It has 2 different decimal points, 1130.01 and 1130.02. Again, 1130 still exists. It will never, ever change. That will always be census tract 1130.00 in this county, in this state. These are the 2 new and completely different census tracts. And going for the 1980 census, we published data for these 2. If we go ahead 10 more years, you see there's a whole lot more development, right? So this population basically doubled again. We estimated going into the 1990 census that there were approximately 16,000 people in this original area. So it is broken down into 4. These are split again. So 1130.01 and 1130.02 will always stay the same as they were. We won't be publishing data for them going forward. What we'll do, I can see my house from here. This is what we publish for the 1990 census, and these will stay as they are forever, whether or not we're publishing data for them or not. And last but not least, we go ahead to 2000. And this is where I want to take a moment to kind of look at how these census tract changes. So again, you can take this outline from 2000 and go back all the way and combine. You have to combine all these different census tracts, right? But from a data standpoint, you can certainly do that, and it's not very difficult. You combine all these census tracts, and you could go back to 1970 and say, okay, how does this piece of land compare this many years ahead or back? And you can do that all the way up to 2020. We just released, we actually haven't released all the data for that, but we do have 2010, obviously, and then 2020 tracks. What I want to point out here is while we definitely keep the outside the same, so that keeps our comparability, when there is population growth within an area, we do try to isolate unique populations. And the reason we do that is, camera keeps moving. The reason we do that is, so an example close to where I physically am right now, we have a lot of large and major universities. They came in, so I went to Texas A&M. There's normal residential housing, normal family style housing, and then all of a sudden you'll have this massive dormitory that holds like 5,000 people in it. When you add a 5,000 person dormitory, the census will have to come in and add additional census tracts. But we'll try to isolate that dormitory, first of all, because it's new and it's unique, from the surrounding more established area, because you say have 5,000 men or women, depending on which dormitory it is, between the ages of 18 and 24, which will seriously skew the data if you just throw it in with the rest of it. So dormitories, large apartment complexes, because it's usually more mobile populations, usually younger populations. For many of you, you probably live in a neighborhood that has like a subdivision that was built and it has a name and people recognize where that is. And that's another part. You want to be able to recognize when you look at the census tract plan for your area. Okay, I understand where that is. But it also is different types of housing and different people. And so we try to keep those unique so that we can better explain the situation of people in those unique places. So any questions there? Dormitories are a great example. Prisons are a great example. If there is a new subdivision, we will keep the original subdivision separate if possible. These are just general examples, and then have the new subdivision have its new census tract. So you're comparing, the housing stock that's been there for longer, and then the new one. So you're comparing 2 different things and keeping the integrity of both. Questions here? Yes, so the question here, is there an attempt to keep tracts equal in population? That is actually yes, so that's a good question. That is literally the main reason that we change census tracts every year. So we can publish the data that we just finished walking through the American Community Survey at this 4,000 person threshold. And that's one of the main reasons that is our threshold. So at 4,000 people, we can publish for those households. I'm sorry, for these areas. So if it gets above to 8,000, we are required to split it in half. So then we're publishing 2 grade sets of data instead of just 1. We want to be able to publish at the lowest possible level. Are the decennial numbers meaningful or just assigned in, the decimal numbers, sorry, decennial, my brain. They are literally just assigned in order. So when we split tracks, you will have the next 2. So yeah, if we go back 1, here's a 304, a 506. We retire those or freeze them forever, and then it's just the next round. There are a couple of, let me give you one example that is important because you may run into it. Travis County, Texas, which of course is where I am. I feel like everywhere I go, I just feel like I'm the reason for causing problems. Eventually, an area, and this will just keep happening more and more, will run out of numbers. So Travis County, I believe, was the main example for this decennial. It takes a while to happen, but Travis County needed to split its census tracts again, and we literally ran out of numbers. What we do then is we retire the entire set and start over with a new, completely start over with a new set. The only reason I mention that is depending on where you are, especially if it's a more urban area, that either has or probably will happen at some point. And what we'll do is create a crosswalk. So we'll say these numbers became these. It only happens like every 60, 70 years, depending on where you are. It may never happen. But if you ever see a data, if this number just stops existing and there's a brand new one, that's why. But otherwise, it's just an order, and it's usually clockwise, if we can, although that's not perfectly clockwise. It's clockwise within the previous census tract. Okay, that's all I'm planning on saying about basically how statistical geographies nest, and then how statistical geographies change over decades, but we try to keep them comparable over time. Deidre, I agree. So it was Professor Laidlaw in like 1910, and he was trying to get specific numbers for his parishes, and I think it was in New York City. So he had a really, really good plan, and we just basically stole it from him. We did the counting, he had a great idea, and then we just kept moving forward with it. And I thought it was cool that his name was Laidlaw. It seems like a really good geography census name. Okay, if everybody understands the basics of geography, changes, nesting, I will show you some of our cool, more flashier tools. This is our website. I do want to show you, I honestly usually just Google these different tools because sometimes they do move around, but all of our data tools and apps are stored right here under Explore Data. If it's going to let me do it. Okay, here we go. So under Data Tools and Apps, we're going to scroll down just a little bit and we're going to look at Census Business Builder. So you can also just Google this, make sure you say Census still, but Census Business Builder, and it will take you to this landing site. So this was originally created for people that wanted to start or expand a small business, and this was the first edition right here. These tools are incredibly similar. I'm going to focus on just the regional analyst. If you can use one, you can use the other. That's not true. The main difference between the two is the small business edition forces you to choose an industry. So it's going to focus on that industry. You're going to be doing an analysis of an area based on that industry. And you can only pick one geography. So say you could look at drywall companies within Cook County, Illinois, and it would focus just on that. One geography, one industry. This version was created because we found out so many people were using this tool for other purposes. So this one was created more for planners, for chambers of commerce. And this one you can choose and combine, and this is the best part of the whole tool. You can choose and combine as many geographies as you want, and it gives you an overview of all of the industries. So let's look at this one. But if you ever want to go back to the other edition, you certainly can. So I just got this note. But it seems like congressional districts should use this system. So actually, all of the congressional districts redistricting nationwide is based on that hierarchy that we talked about with block groups. But yeah, there's a lot of areas going through that right now. So from this screen, and there's another reason I love this tool, and I know I'm biased, but I love this tool, is it's really simple. Where American Factfinder, you can kind of end up being in the weeds, you can kind of end up in the back of the system and not remember what you originally selected. try to get into something and find out, this data set doesn't exist for this geography or vice versa. This one is, you can't mess it up. It will let you work through the process while you do. You can click find my location, which I'm going to do, or you can enter a city, town, zip code, whatever geography you want, and it will let you, it'll just take you there. So I am in Leander, Texas. It's giving me all of the geographies for which I specifically fall within right this moment. So I'm in Census Tracks 1766, although that is technically outdated because this is going to be 2019 ACS data. It has my zip code. It has the city I live in. So if you happen to be within an incorporated place, it will show you that here. It will show your county or your county equivalent, your state, and then if you happen to physically be located within an MSA. I get a lot of calls about people saying it's not populating when I'm saying my location. It's going to have something to do with your computer settings. But regardless, this is a good way to find out. It's a good starting point, or you can type it in yourself. I'm going to start, so there's two different things here. There's a really cool mapping section. For the mapping section, I'm going to focus on zip codes because I think that's useful for this group. When we produce a report, I'm actually going to go up to the county level and I'll tell you why. But let's start here, zip code. So this is built on ArcGIS. It's an Esri product. For those of you who are familiar, it's a very cool product. It also can be very expensive, and it takes a lot of work to kind of get you to this point. So this is just data already built into it. Here is, let me zoom out a little bit. So here we are north of Austin. It will always tell you, for this one, I don't know why, okay. So it'll always tell you for this tool, we're always looking at all sectors. It will tell you the location. We're looking at 78641. And the map always defaults to total population. There's some filters here that we're not going to get into, but you could technically filter some things out. I've never really understood why. This quick overview will tell you some basic information about this particular zip code. So we have an average of 3.29 people per household. 92.3% people graduate high school. Home ownership rate is 80.9, and average income is 110,902. If you want to look at a different geography, all you have to do is click on it. This is the only tool we have where you don't have to start all the way back over and start from the beginning. So now we're looking at zip code 78628, and it changed and updated for the percentage for some of these basic data points. If you want to change the mapping, which again, it defaults to total population, it is the most boring data point we produce, you click here. Under consumers and residents, this is going to very, very, very closely mirror the data profiles we just went through from the ACS. So this is where I'm going to spend most of our time, but these demographic characteristics are, literally the DP 05 that we walked through. These socioeconomic characteristics are the DP02. So this is not new information. It's just going to be packaged more fancy. It's going to be fancier packaging. And then housing characteristics are here. All of these other ones, I'm going to barely mention them. So we have information on annual businesses. And when you hover over these, it will tell you about them. You have quarterly business information, workforce information, building permits. That is just the number of permits that were approved and started within this reference year. And there's also some information about certificates of occupancy, I think, built in there. Consumer spending is not specifically from a survey that we do. We got that in partnership with Esri. And so they have information on how much alcohol your neighbors are drinking, how much they're spending on clothing, how much travel, how much healthcare, how much on housing costs. Everybody loves to see how much money people are spending on alcohol in their area. Everybody loves that data point. So while it's not our data point, it gives you a lot of really rich data that relates to it. So you can look at healthcare costs is another one that's really, so you can look at an area that has a high percentage of people with health insurance and compare that to the cost. So these are all built in. And then if you really want to, and this is something we've got a great PDF on, but if you ever want to, I can walk you through it. You can bring in your own data. So say you have a data set that, as long as it's the same geography, so if you have it for zip codes or counties or whatever, you can bring your own data in here and it'll work with our reports and our mapping. So that should make it easy. Under consumer residents, this is everyone who lives here. It's just the ACS data. Let's look at percentage of people, percentage in poverty. Just so we can do a quick overview of the mapping. I'm going to minimize this just so we can see it a little more clearly. So you can see here, the zip code, which is actually highlighted in blue, has a percentage of, should tell us, here we go, 6.6% of people living in poverty. And if you want to see where people are struggling less often, you can look at these green surrounding zip codes and kind of this corridor here. If you want to look where people are struggling more, you can look, lower down here to 14.9 and 61.7%. And then if you want to explore those, you just click on the actual geography. It will change your location and you can look at percentage here. So here we go, 22.8. So this is an easy way to just click around, understand, pick the data point, and then click around to see what information they have, some basic information. Any questions on the mapping? I'm going to show you how to combine different geographies, which is like one of the coolest parts. I'm going to back out here, but any questions about just the very basics here? Wow, you have a son and Leander, very cool. Okay, I'm going to go back to Census Business Builder. If you click here, it'll take you back to the beginning. Every single data point that we could have chosen from that map will show up in the report. So I'm going to show you how to create a report. Because a lot of the data that we produce, so at any geography, we'll have all the human being data. So the first, information about the households. For a lot of our economic data, the vast majority of it, we can't publish below the county. So I'm going to show you really quickly how to map. We'll look at a state, we'll look at Texas. If you want to map for the county level, most of this will populate, but I want to at least show you something that has most of the data in the report, and then you can decide how much it's relevant or not. So from my location, I'm going to go to Texas. Okay. To combine geographies or to create your own geography, this is the only tool that we have that does this. If you want to edit your region, so right now we're only looking at Texas. Let's say we want to add New Mexico. You click on New Mexico, we get this little pop-up, which will take a second, but it'll happen, I think. Like I said it, now it doesn't want to do it. Let's try Oklahoma. Of course, it's not working when I'm trying to do this live. Okay, so it's highlighted it. Okay, what should happen and what normally happens is I click on this, it pops up and it says add to region, and I say add to region. Let me try this one more time just to make sure it's not stuck. Okay, I'm going to go back out real quick because that's a really important part. Let's go on Travis County. Okay, so here we are, Travis County. Let's edit region, and let's try to add the county to the north. Come on. Why on earth is that not working? Okay, I promise you what normally happens is that you'll click on this, it'll pop up, it'll say add county. And so you could create, say, a combination of counties, a combination of census tracts, you could combine zip codes, you can combine places. The only thing I'll caution you is this system normally will let you combine whatever geographies you feel are appropriate. If you are combining places that overlap, so say you're combining a zip code and a census tract, this will let you do it, and that's okay. You can use this however you want. You've paid for it with your tax dollars. It's publicly available. Just know that it will you'll be double counting the population in that overlapping area, if that makes sense. So like it won't remove, so it won't just add the extra. It'll, for any calculations it does for you, it's gonna do both of those geographies simultaneously. So again, normally I could have added whatever counties I want here. It's not gonna let me do that. If you want to create an report for your region, you click create region report. Right now it's gonna be the exact same. No, it's not, this is Travis County. Here, because we currently have Williamson highlighted right now. If you want it for Williamson County, you could click here. I'm going to click on Create Region Report for Travis County, and we'll just walk through this really quickly and take any questions. Again, these are the same data sources you can pull from data.census.gov. It's just creating something that's ready to go and ready to use. The first page will tell you what your region is and just an overview of what's within this report. This is actually helpful if you're handing it or emailing it to someone else. It saves you a lot of time of trying to explain what's here. Consumers and residents, this is just residents, but it can be a little confusing. It'll have some basic charts and graphs over here. You can change those if you want to. So say you want to look at the percentage of people 18 years and over, you can do that here and then compare what the data was from 2010 to 14 to 2015, 2019. And then you can also compare this region, which is just the one county, unfortunately, to the US and to Texas. Every single thing that you could have chosen to populate the map with will automatically be on the report. And that's actually confusing to a lot of people, but it's great. So you don't have, whatever you were playing with on the map, every single option is going to be here. So, and then if you find something really cool on the report and want to go back and map it, they're the exact same verbiage, they're the exact same thing. Next up, we have socioeconomic characteristics. So again, same thing we talked about when we were talking about data.census.gov. So actually a major decrease here in the percentage of people living in poverty from 2010 to 2014, which is great. You can compare Travis County to the United States and Texas. I will say whichever charts and graphs you've chosen when you save, when you either download, when you download or print, there's two options on this data, that is what the charts and graphs will be. So while all of this will be on the report, just make sure that you've actually selected what you want to be in these charts and graphs. Housing characteristics, again, same thing that we've already discussed. Business summary, we'll give you information about just overview characteristics of size of employer here. Business revenue, this one wasn't populating for us last week either. We have non-employer businesses. Here's your workforce information. Quarterly businesses, building permits, business comparisons, so you can look at by NAICS code, so by industry. Here's where we did the division for you again and made a separate page for it. I don't know why this one's not populating. It should be, but here's your employer business by ownership. And here's your consumer spending. So this is the data that we have in conjunction with Esri. It comes mostly from credit card records. Most of these have a drop down. There's a lot of good information here that you can use for either comparing the two together or going back and using this to map it. If you want to download it, I can't imagine a reason you do it in Excel or CSV file. It just complicates it. It makes a really nice PDF so you can email it, print it, save it, and it'll look just like this, but you'll be able to save it. Questions there? And Katie, I see you back on screen. So I know we have about 4 or 5 more minutes. We're a great group. We haven't had a whole lot of hopefully we were, answering the questions or focusing on the things that you all wanted to hear about. But Katie, is there anything you want to cover? Are there any last minute questions?
I'll just give another couple minutes and see if any questions come in. This has been a great presentation. Like I've learned a lot about the census. Like we went over this beforehand, but this was really good to kind of go through. So I definitely appreciate learning more about this. And I hope everyone was able to get something out of this and become a little bit more familiar about some of the tools that are out there. And while we're just waiting for questions to come in, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I do want to ask everyone, for our demographic purposes, we do ask for, if you have a chance, if you could, please fill out the form here and just give us your zip code. This just helps us to figure out where people are coming from. So if you could do that, I definitely would appreciate it.
I think we covered everything on our list. Yeah, if anyone ever has any questions, you can follow up. Katie obviously knows how to get a hold of me. I'll put my email address here in the chat. So I cover Texas, Kansas, and Arizona, but if you have a simple basic question, I'm happy to answer at any time. But if you have more in-depth analysis you want to do in your area, I have a colleague that covers wherever you are. We have a team there to help you. Specific, they focus on the data for your area as well. So if you get into this later, which happens often, right? I can never come up with a question when I need it. If you get in later and have some questions about anything at all, you can send me an email, and I will either answer it for you or connect you with somebody who can go in more in depth.
Thank you everyone for joining with us. I am dropping a link to the survey in the chat. If you're looking for the MLA credit, you'll be able to fill out that survey and then get the code to claim your MLA credit. And we appreciate any feedback that you guys have. We're also getting comments from Jeanette. Thank you, Christine, for joining us. And Jeanette said, these are exciting tools to see, and I look forward to using them. I remember way back in the day using the print statistical abstract for the United States. We've come a long way.
I still have mine. So it's funny. I love those, actually. I kind of miss having the, we went to CD-ROM when we got really fancy, but I still have my paper statistical abstract. So I feel you. I love those.
Yeah, and Heather said, thank you for a great class. So
yeah, I'll hang out for a couple more minutes. Like I said, email me anytime. I will, I'm happy to help, or I will find someone who might be more familiar with your area. But we've got a team of about 25 of us that are here just to do this. So anything you need to know, we should be able to find someone who can help you.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.